We are the wind in the sails of your business. We are your compass. Chart your course towards your targets. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.
Africa is rising, they say. But Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people? Through social change and development. Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1. Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Social Conscience with NASA, SCWN, right here at the Africa Business Radio studio in Lagos, Nigeria. I remain your host with the most, NASA. So it's the last episode for the month, and after having several conversations about entrepreneurship across some parts of Africa, I thought it was a good way to end it would be to, bring it back to Nigeria, the alleged giant of Africa. And over the past few conversations I've had, about entrepreneurship on the continent, there's been some common challenges that cut across. And one of the ones that stood out for me is the narrative of entrepreneurship as sort of a plan B for the unemployed and energetic youth population we have. So you find people going into entrepreneurship as a second option because they're unable to get employed. And this makes me question the potential for the sustainability of small businesses if the origins of these businesses are already starting off with this sort of flawed mindsets. Today, the topic for discussion is the role of entrepreneurship in diversifying the Nigerian economy. And it was inspired by a very good friend of mine, Akanimo, who is an SME banking specialist with one of the leading commercial banks in Nigeria. And it also happens to be that Nigeria officially slid into a recession. So it's, for me, a timely conversation to have. And to have this conversation with me are two gentlemen who are very cerebral, yet relatable. And they'll be in to share their views on the topic based on their vast wealth of experience across the globe. But before I introduce them, please stay right here with me while I go on a quick break.
We are the wind in the sails of your business. We are your compass. Chart your course towards your targets. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.
Africa is rising, they say. But Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people? Through social change and development. Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1. Welcome back, and if you're just tuning in, it's Social Conscience with NASA on Africa Business Radio, and the topic is the role of entrepreneurship in diversifying Nigeria's economy. And to put some context to this, so entrepreneurial activities have been found the world over to be capable of making positive impacts on the economy of a nation and the quality of life of the people, which in turn stimulates economic growth and empowerment of the marginalized. So many countries have been able to sort of energize and transform the entrepreneurship subsector, which has then reduced to the barest minimum their unemployment and poverty levels. The official announcement of another recession in Nigeria, for me, is a strong statement about the increased poverty levels in the country. So, how does a diversified economy address this current state? And what role does entrepreneurship play? And what are the realities of entrepreneurs in Nigeria? What do they have to deal with to thrive? To help shed light on these questions, as mentioned prior, I have two gentlemen whom I have a great deal of respect for, and they're very progressive leaders in their respective roles and genuinely support young Nigerians. First is Dr. Andrew S. Nevin, one of PwC's leading global thinkers, working at the complex intersection of economics, strategy, capital markets, and investment. He is PwC West Africa's financial services leader across assurance, tax, and advisory, and has almost 33 years of professional experience as an entrepreneur, private equity investor, line manager, economist, and strategy consultant. Over his professional career, he has previously lived in Asia, North America, and Europe, and is now based in Lagos since 2012. He describes himself as a tireless advocate for innovation and is one of the leading advocates for blockchain technology adoption in the country, including sponsoring the blockchain website www.blockchainafrica.io. Second is Osaretin Oswald Guobadia, co-founder, executive vice president, and chief operating officer of DBH Solutions, a building infrastructure and top-tier technology solutions provider in West Africa. He is a business strategy and technology consultant with over 20 years' experience in technology and business strategy, and he's a non-executive director of Renaissance Capital Nigeria, a leading emerging and frontier markets investment bank with access to over 50 markets globally. His interests also span venture capitalism and entrepreneurship, with significant interest in mentorship and funding startups. He is committed to supporting social welfare programs that improve lives and communities, and he's created the Resolve Foundation, which offers credible and visible opportunities for private individuals and enterprises to execute their philanthropic, corporate social responsibility and sustainability initiatives. To also add to that, Oswald is the co-author of the book In Pursuit Africa, which is a book he co-authored with a friend chronicling their entrepreneurship journey in Nigeria. To my listeners, please feel free to weigh in by sending your questions or comments to Africa Biz Radio, that's Africa BIZ Radio, one word, on Twitter with the hashtag SCWN. Okay, welcome, Andrew and Osaretin. That was a very long profile and very impressive, and thank you for accepting to join and share your perspectives. When you have very powerful gentlemen on the show, then, it's a bit daunting. So thank you very much for accepting to be part of this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Janessa.
You're welcome. Okay, so you had all that background context that I provided and the topic. So first, let me ask, how are you guys today? How are you doing? Let me not just jump right into questions.
Well, what's there to say? We're all trying these days. I mean, it's not easy with all the challenges in the world. Of course, challenges in Nigeria, challenges elsewhere, but everyone I know is trying, so we're doing okay.
That's
all
true.
You can do.
But you know what they say about challenges? The more challenges there, then there are opportunities, right?
Well, at my age, I don't know how many more opportunities I have left. I just have challenges, but there we go. It's a good saying.
And you're not that old. Oswald?
Yeah, we work through the challenges, right? So I guess, like we say in Nigeria, we're managing,
I know.
Do our best.
Managing. Okay, so the topic is, the role of entrepreneurship in diversifying Nigeria's economy. And before I go into the technical questions, as it were, I'd just like to know from your perspective, what is entrepreneurship? What does entrepreneurship mean to you? And I'll start with you, Oswald.
So, I mean, it's a set of skill sets, it's characteristics, but at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is really risk management, right? So it's when you decide that the idea that you have in your hand or your mind is something that you're going to feed yourself with. And then you walk out the door of your employer or school and you pursue that, that idea, and you believe that this idea is going to feed you. Because it's a common misnomer that when you're an entrepreneur, it means you're out, doing your own business. You could very well be working for a company and have an entrepreneurial mindset.
That's right.
Which most people refer to as an entrepreneur. Right. So you have that mindset, you're running a PLN in your business, you're coming up with ideas every day and you're driving them home. and it's just kind of your thing, but you haven't quite taken that risk yet. You haven't walked out the door and said, this new doohickey is what I'm going to put into the market, and this doohickey is going to feed me. I think that the minute you do that, you become an entrepreneur.
Fantastic. I'd like to agree with you, but I'd like to hear from Andrew as well. Andrew, what's entrepreneurship to you?
Well, for me, entrepreneurship is just anyone that steps up and tries to make change, right? I mean, you come into this world and you can either kind of go with the flow, or you can try to make something happen that's a bit different. And so entrepreneurship can be expressed in so many different ways. Obviously, people that start businesses, we'll get into that. It's not so easy. I mean, as Oswald says, entrepreneurs, so people within companies that make change, that take risks and make change. But of course, it applies to things outside of business too. I mean, I know so many young Nigerians. Every day I find new young Nigerians trying to do things with NGOs that make positive change in their community, in teaching, in mental health, and Man's Up initiative is a good one. Someone who just stepped up, who saw a need, is trying to make a difference. So for me, the entrepreneurship happens kind of everywhere in Nigeria. And young people are driving it, so it's very exciting to see. And of course, just like we have entrepreneurs that are trying to drive change, we sadly have forces in Nigeria that are trying to prevent change. So you have a titanic battle between good and evil right now going on in the country.
Isn't that just sad? Okay, interesting. And thank you very much for your definitions. And what I like about what both of you have said is, if I were to bring that together, there's a purposefulness about being an entrepreneur. And like you said, Oswald, I always say that it's not until you go it alone to start your business then that you become an entrepreneur. You start to demonstrate the characteristics of an entrepreneur even within an organization, because it's a mindset. So that ability to take ownership. And Andrew, to your point, that sort of drive or purpose to want to make a difference or to create value, right? So I asked this question for a reason, right? So everybody talks about the youthful population in Africa and in Nigeria and how there's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurship to thrive. But with the high level of unemployment, entrepreneurship for me just then appears to be like a plan B. So it takes away from that purposefulness. This is my interpretation. And people just do it because it's the next best alternative to not having a job. So what then does this mean for the sustainability of the kind of businesses that these people then go on to start? And is it why we see that, businesses only last for a short while and don't last the long haul? Who wants to go first?
So I would say, Nigeria tends to break models, right? So it's interesting. A lot of things that you bring to Nigeria and it makes sense everywhere else, it tends to get broken there just because of the way the system is lacking a process to it. So if you think about that phrase that says, the lack is the mother of innovation. But there are certain things we do in Nigeria. You would say, is that innovative? Like the guy who charges phones on the side of the street. Is that innovation, or is that filling a gap? There's an actual gap. There's no power, and he's providing a service, right? And then you also have to think about. I get your point about the fact that there's no jobs, so you have to do something. But you also have to look from the other perspective that we have a lot of nothing. So there's a lot of opportunities that are embedded in that. So there's a lot of opportunities that even people who have jobs may be distracted from going to jobs because they see the opportunities of creating something. Yeah. So the problem becomes, do they have the toolkit? Do they have the set of skills to develop that business or that idea to fruition? So those are different questions. So the problem is a bunch of little bits, and those things have to kind of come together for it to make sense. Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I think we run the danger. You've hit it on the nail on the head. There are a lot of people that don't want to be business entrepreneurs. That doesn't mean they're not leaders. They may have leadership in other areas. And of course, it's not a requirement to be a member of society that you need to be a leader or an entrepreneur. But just as you said, what's happened in Nigeria is because the opportunities for formal employment or employment in big companies or even medium-sized companies is so low. The opportunities are not there. There aren't enough of those. People are, in a sense, forced into entrepreneurship when they shouldn't have to be there. So, we'll get into who should be an entrepreneur, what they should be doing. But it is a difficult thing. And sometimes I've said publicly that we shouldn't we shouldn't be talking so much about entrepreneurship. We should be talking more about building large companies that create structures, that create employment, that build ecosystems around them. And of course, they're also going to build entrepreneurs around them too. But these large companies are also a place where people gain a lot of skills, they gain a lot of contacts, they can learn, and they can become entrepreneurs later if they want to. So I do think you've hit the nail on the head. I think sometimes we actually talk about entrepreneurship too much.
Fantastic. And, when you talk about, instead of talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about large corporates. I'm going to refer to the MSME survey report for 2020 that you were a part of. It was done by PwC. And some of the insights from that survey is that, micro businesses are the largest segment at about 90%. And only 7% are responsible for exports. So when I saw that, I thought, okay, micro businesses are the tiny businesses that everybody has, the mom and shops, etc., that, have less than, I think, about 5 million in terms of assets. And if we're talking about how, entrepreneurship is huge and it's just a bunch of all these micro businesses, how do we realistically get them to grow to scale to the kind of large corporates, or are they going to always remain micro businesses? And is that what is necessary for the economy?
Well, let me just, because it's our report, I'll start and then Oswald can jump in. I guess the people that are doing the micro businesses those micro businesses, if we're really honest, are unlikely to grow. I mean, they're not technology micro businesses. They don't scale. Hopefully they can feed your family and do that, but we shouldn't expect them to scale. But what would happen, in our view, if you had more the organized formal sector developed more and you had more bigger businesses? I mean, just to take the obvious example, a company like Dangote not only creates, Mr. Dangote, tens of thousands of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs in existing companies, in the companies, but they create all the spin-off effects, all the suppliers, all the off-takers of it that are, in many cases, are also getting to be at least medium-sized businesses. And then, of course, there are smaller businesses that are also part of the ecosystem. So we want to have a lot of big champions. The more big champions there are, that also creates more opportunities for entrepreneurs that are trying to do innovation. I mean, if you look in, for example, the financial sector, when we talk about these fintechs, who are the customers for the fintechs? Well, normally the customers are the big banks. So you need to have the big banks in place to create the opportunities for the fintech. So I really think it needs some ecosystem thinking about it. But we shouldn't be upset if a micro entrepreneur isn't going to grow. That's fine, as long as they're doing fine and delivering. But if they want to be in the formal economy, earning more of a salary, we should also create an economy that gives them that opportunity if that's what they want.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go to Oswald, and this ties right into the question I was going to ask Oswald. There's a chapter in his book that he wrote with Chukwuka where he talks about the SMEs being the backbone of the economy, but in Africa, they tend to be the ground that big corporations walk on. So, to your point, Andrew, where you just talked about how the big corporates are supposed to be the ones creating these opportunities sort of down that value chain. Oswald and Chukwuka obviously have different experiences. And so, Oswald, please talk to that bit in your book where you say, the large corporates tend to be the ground that big corporates walk on.
Yeah, so if you look at, Andrew just, painted a picture that, I would actually love to ideally live in, where we have a lot of more additional corporates, right? So instead of one Dangote, please give me 10, give me 100. Nigeria, 200 million people, we should have, 1,000 Dangotes, right? But what tends to happen is there's a bit of a monopolistic approach to how some of these businesses are set up. There's a bit of a reliance, and it's almost like there's a false sense of limited resources in a country that is so rich with resources. That leads to a very approach where the big corporates are not really into ecosystem development as was painted by Andrew. If they were into ecosystem development, there's a lot of ecosystem leakages, right? So there are things that people have developed in Nigeria and can do the job, but it gets sent off somewhere else. And this company that could do it never grows. So it's not really a sense of micro companies growing. Micro companies can always be a micro company. You're a one-man shop, you do consultancy on something very, 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 small and tiny. Continue doing it fantastic as long as you provide the service and you can feed your family. But there are a lot of middle companies, a lot of small to medium-sized companies that are building something that actually can grow to be a Dangote in Nigeria. But they don't only get the oxygen, right? And that's kind of on the passive side. On the active side, there's actually, a very bad sense of, triple C, cash conversion cycles. There's a lot of money management, payment management with payments from government and, big corporates. That actually does a lot of damage to smaller companies. Right, smaller companies have a cash cycle and management that's a little shorter. They can't really, they can't go a long time without being paid. The money owed to them. And then while you're waiting for your money owed to them, the ground shifts from under you and the FX rate changes, and all of a sudden, your 500 million naira that you're about to get is now worth 200,000 naira. Right? So, and then so there's a lot of different things that it's almost like come and find me. The truth of the matter is that as the book, the bigger companies tend to treat the smaller companies very badly, and the ecosystem never gets built. They end up just being the only one, and that's how it's going to be for a while. Wow,
Andrew, you just had Oswald, so hearing firsthand from the entrepreneur.
Yeah, I know. He's exactly that's exactly right. I mean, the conditions. I mean, it's a little bit like they used to say about the English football team. It wasn't the losing that killed you; it was the hope, right? So we don't say that anymore because England's doing a bit better, which is great to see. But I mean, the thing about being an entrepreneur, and I've been there. I mean, the only reason I'm in Nigeria was I was an entrepreneur in China, and I lost everything and all my friends, and had to leave the country, right? So I know how painful it is, and I know so many entrepreneurs who are trying so hard, and every time they kind of look like they're going to make a breakthrough, something else happens. Some other infrastructure challenge, some extra cost, the customs people doing something, tax people calling them up about that. So something that they are trying to add value to. The input wasn't high enough quality. It shouldn't have had its on cap. And so the resilience of the Nigerian entrepreneur is legendary. But what happens is this chips away at the value, right? I mean, we're not growing enough medium-sized companies, some of which would become larger ones. And, quite frankly, in this environment, I think Oswald hit it exactly right. I mean, I don't want to be negative. These are all my clients, but the bigger companies become, in a sense, predatory. They just naturally, because they can bully all of these kind of medium-sized companies down to the micro companies. That's what happens. And in this specific issue about payments, I mean, we put a paper about this as well, and about the concept of factoring, because it's just killing you if you are a smaller company and then someone owes you money. So who's got the money? Not to pick on anyone, whether Dangote, Lafarge, but any of the large, a bank owes you the money. They know they owe you the money, but they don't pay you for 90 days, right? So then it just has a ripple impact on your business. Hopefully you survive.
Oswald is nodding profusely,
but it reduces the velocity of money, which harms the whole economy in a big way. So it's a very, very difficult environment. And yet, despite that, I mean, we all know so many people that are trying to do amazing things. Either amazing things that are just trying to do them, they're not necessarily innovation, and other ones trying to do absolutely new things in a hostile environment. So that's, people sometimes ask what keeps me going every day, because I have probably one of the worst jobs in the country, right? Being an economic voice when there's no good economic news. But what keeps me going is just seeing this energy, and if we could just unleash a little bit more of it'd just be phenomenal. So, but it's not easy.
Fantastic.
All that energy needs to be channeled, right, and supported, right? There's a lot of energy. I mean, we have all the components to make a fantastic soup.
We do,
right? We have intelligent young people, right? We have resources, natural resources, but it's just not channeled properly. It's not structured properly. The opportunities are not structured properly to allow people to really tap into resources. So then we end up getting the feeling that there can only be one of this kind of company, right? But the truth of the matter, the material and what he's selling, it's all over the country. The resources are everywhere. So it's interesting.
Wow. So you know what? It's very interesting that both of you, I mean, so Oswald was there, Junior, you were obviously echoing his sentiments, Andrew, and with the book that he's written, like, oh, you know what, this sounds very familiar. But we talk about these solutions and we talk about what should be. But how can we make it a reality so that we don't just keep talking about this? Is there even a chance that it can be a reality? So Oswald, you've just said that, we have the resources and everybody agrees. So how do we actually make this a reality? Who's going to go first?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I've been saying this the last little while. I'm more optimistic now than I've ever been.
You are?
I moved here full time in 2012, but I started really living here in 2008, and I'm more optimistic. And the reason for it, in a way, is we don't have any choice, right? I mean, if you look at what's happened in the COVID situation, it's really kind of created a moment of truth for Nigeria. But I've seen a number of things over the last 5 years that are very powerful. Let me just name a couple of them. I mean, there are certainly people in the federal government who want to do the right thing, who recognize this on that. I mean, with Dr. Jamoke Apebe, Yuande, I think the finance minister, I think the engineer Chidi, who's in charge of our privatizations. But even more importantly than that, I think the states have figured out, state governors, many of them have figured out that actually, if they don't make it happen at their state, I mean, the federal allocation is simply too small. There's 200 million Nigerians. There's 800 million barrels of oil a year. Half of it goes to the IOC. So you got 2 barrels per person, and then you get your share at the state. It's not a cake economy. It's not a cookie economy. It's not it's a crumb economy, right? That's all you're getting are the crumbs. So now a number of governors have figured out they need to make it happen, and you can really see that energy in the past 3 or 4 years, which was not discussed 5 or 7 years ago. I had an event last week with one of the governors who I won't name here, but he was just not from a state you would expect.
Yeah.
But he was just fantastic. The event was about privatization. He said, look, these are the assets that we have, the dead assets we have that we want to turn. We need entrepreneurs. Obviously, they need people who, not small entrepreneurs, people who have money in this case, but really starting to recognize that they are responsible to help their states develop. So I'm more optimistic on that, and I think there's going to be a lot more things happening local. I mean, as Oswald said, it's a country of 200 million people going to 800 million people. I mean, there's more than enough opportunity for everyone to build huge amounts of white space. So I'm not getting pessimistic. I'm getting optimistic.
Oswald, are you optimistic as an entrepreneur?
Enough, yes, I am. I am. So I've been doing business in Nigeria for about 14 years now. Yeah. And if you're a process-driven person, you just like solving problems, you start to figure out, what's the only route out of this? Right. And I can tell you for a fact, the only route out of this is for young entrepreneurs to get more political.
Oh, really?
It's simply the only way. So basically, if you look at government as the train track builder. So the government lays the tracks for you to come run your idea, which is your train over it. You
need to have a seat on the
table. You can make the fanciest train you ever want.
Yeah.
The tracks ain't there, you ain't running.
That's
right?
true.
So it's critical that some of us go help put those tracks together, right? So I think if you look at the policy structure and matter of fact, Andrew just named a number of names. It's just not enough, right? We need more. Tens. More. We need a lot of entrepreneurs, but I think we need more people of that kind of mindset in government to fix the problems. So I think until that happens, we're going to be in a circular conversation because you need critical mass, and it's just not enough.
Not enough. So do you think it's a problem of critical mass? So my friend prior to the show had asked a question about, we have amazing policies, we have amazing initiatives and plans by the government on paper, but then we just never really see it come to fruition. Like, it's just, so is it executed, or is it poorly executed, or it's just not enough? So speaking to critical mass, why is it that those fantastic ideas just don't seem to translate into the value that I would like to see?
Because you need more people to drive those ideas.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So I'll go back to Andrew, and just to address the topic of today and bring it into view. So the survey report talks about, the Nigerian MSMEs being a key contributor to GDP and accounting for 96% of the total number of businesses in the country. And the question to you, Andrew, is, in light of the current economic situation, what does diversification look like for Nigeria, and how does entrepreneurship play a role?
Well, I think in terms of diversification, people sometimes ask, which sectors, and our answer to that is all sectors. I mean, there is so much white space in Nigeria. I mean, to put this in context, I mean, I went to China the first time in 1983. I lived there for 10 years from 1998. And of course, we all understand lifting 600 million people out of poverty. What people may not understand is in 1983, there was not a single private vehicle. Not one private car in the country of 800 million people. And by 2008, it was the biggest market and the biggest producer of cars, 25 years. So we're in a sense in that same space. So everything is open to be developed, whether it's power, infrastructure, Nollywood, FMCG, agri supply chain, manufacturing, education, healthcare. So it's all open to there. And of course, we've also stressed real estate as a critical area that needs to develop. So I mean, for the entrepreneur, there's so much to do. But again, a lot of this has to happen. I mean, so many. It is a very, very difficult thing to build a national business, and so much has to happen at the state and local levels. You can build a big business in a state of 3 million people, right? Yeah. You can build many big businesses on that, and some of them will stitch together and make kind of national businesses. And that's why I said it's so critical that we kind of get this state level development on that. And as I said, I think we're starting to see some of that. But I mean, the scale of entrepreneurship. The thing is, there's so much supply of entrepreneurship. You go back to this question of why it's not happening. I mean, and we said this at the time. If you look at I don't say much negative anymore because we no point in giving more bad news. But if you look at the economic recovery and growth plan, it's the complexity of so many separate programs, and you could just anyone who's built a business would realize building a national scale infrastructure for something takes a decade. So then to put so many 10, 20 programs, anchor borrowers, trader money, SME intervention fund, the electricity intervention fund. This stuff is not going to happen at the national level. It's going to happen at a local level. Even something like electricity. I mean, people know I'm Canadian originally. Canada does not. I don't think we don't have a national electricity regulator. We just simply say to the provinces, you sort it out. They've all sorted it out. If you want to trade power, you trade power. Yeah. So we don't use the word restructuring because of its political connotations, but just from getting the economy to move, given the entrepreneurial talent that we have out there, given the scale of the country, given the diversity of assets everywhere, the diversity of cultural backgrounds, it has to happen at the local level. And so we've been saying, to the federal government, we said publicly, let's just do less. What's happening right now is even if the government got to neutral, this country would boom, right? It's just the reason we're not booming is because the government is not neutral. It is an active drag on what's happening in the country. And all you have to do is get to neutral. So please stop trying to do so many things and just let the entrepreneurial spirit go. And one of the things I've said in other settings that went a little bit viral, I said, I think Nigeria is the easiest country in the world to manage the economy. Yes,
I've heard that.
It manages itself. Nigerians self-organize. So just let that power of self-organize unleash, and the country will be absolutely fine. Be fantastic.
I actually agree with that.
You agree that Nigeria is easy to manage and self-organized, really?
No, see, look, after running the business in Nigeria for so long, I can point to several instances where it's actually the government that got in the way of something good.
Right.
So something good was about to happen. It was the government. And when you say the government, sometimes we tend to forget that it's not always the government, it's personalities within the government.
That's correct.
Right?
That's right.
So that's where we tend to miss the differentiating factor. I mean, one of the things that, generally, like for instance, in America, this is probably the first time where people have actually seen a real personality in how the country is ran. Normally, it's just kind of a president and then a government. In Nigeria, we kind of have that same thing at every level, where there are personalities at every level.
Absolutely.
And each personality may potentially affect what you're trying to do.
That's right? Even the guy at the gate.
Even the guy at the gates. Have you ever tried to walk into an NPC?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's interesting. When you're told your name is not in a database and your name is in the database, then
you have to find a way to make sure.
Who's in real control of that situation? Then you know.
Wow. Okay. Okay, I'll move to my next question. And Oswald, this is for you. So 46% of the businesses surveyed in the PwC MSME survey report pointed to private equity as the type of funding they would need the most to scale up. And this apparently aligns with the PwC's 2018 Family Business Survey, where 39% of family business owners revealed that they would consider PE investments. Now, in the chapter about the 300 missing pages, you make reference to the unwillingness of investors to fund startups of young, smart people. Can you shed more light on this?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'll start from the point where I don't always think money is what a lot of these companies need, right?
Really?
So in the beginning of this
saying access to finance. No?
No. A lot of these companies don't have... The truth is, a lot of these companies don't have a finance problem. Sometimes just being badly run. Right, and some of the things we mentioned earlier about the lack of access to projects and work that they can do. So for instance, my company is 14, 15 years old, and we've never taken any finance. And if we had the kind of projects that we deserved, we'd be, further down the line, further down the line than we are, right? So I think there are a number of things that may come in before certain companies do need finance, right? Yeah. It's just how you run the company. What experience do you have? And I think that's where we kind of started the conversation, as in not everybody really should be an entrepreneur because you haven't gotten the experiences by working for somebody else, right, and so forth and so on. And you're now gone on into this venture and somehow you think somebody should come and invest in your company? Question mark, question mark. You know, Andrew sits with somebody who's not qualified to do what he's doing. Right. He's not going to put his money in there, right? Of course. I sit down with somebody who doesn't. Yeah, so you see a lot of that, right? They're a good idea, but they don't lack the context, or they don't lack the ability or the capacity actually, to actually deliver on the solution they're talking about. So you want to invest in that. Then to answer the question directly about what was said in the book, is also the fact that, you have that problem and you see it. Yes. So why would you put the money in there? And also, you are also in a stage where you are also the person with the money. You're also operating in an environment where you are uncertain, right? So you have this thing with VUCA, volatility. You have this thing when you yourself, you're not certain. So it's very difficult for you to now say, I'm going to take this cash and put in something else that I'm also doubly uncertain about. It's outside of my control. So that delays the investment aspect. But I do think that, if you were to list out 10 companies and say these guys think they need money, I think if you work on how the companies manage to some extent, you find that money is not exactly their problem. It may be access to projects or better management. So it's interesting. Even better cash management.
Okay, I hear you. And it's interesting that you talk about this in terms of, the capacity of the people running the business and, what prior experience do they have. And we also then talked about how entrepreneurship is like a plan B for a lot of young Nigerians who haven't gotten a job. So how then do I get that experience? Because my country hasn't given me the opportunity to get that experience, but I must survive. So I have this bright idea. I may not have I don't have the capacity, but maybe I'm open to learning, but then I just need someone to believe in me, So how do we then close that gap? Because I don't have maybe if I had the opportunity, I would have worked and gained the experience that would make you have some trust in me. Then in the book, you also talked about tribal lines. So people would only invest in people that they are from the same tribe.
Yeah. No, I think one thing you have to understand, you said the willingness to learn. So you've hired in Nigeria. I've hired in Nigeria. Yes. We understand the gaps that exist, right? I think anybody who, in that environment, who's truly willing to fill those gaps in has the opportunity, especially, it's a different time. We used to have to go to a library to gain knowledge, right? Yes. Now you can gain knowledge from your phone,
Absolutely.
Right? So if you truly do want to fill those gaps in and are true to yourself and realistic about what you're trying to learn, you can indeed learn it, right? Self-develop. What tends to happen, and trying to invest in startups over the last few years, a lot of things I find is, I've met people who want to be Mark Zuckerberg, right? And they want to be Mark Zuckerberg with the entire complete thing. Oh, I started this idea in my garage, but we don't have garages in Nigeria.
Are you sure? I did.
Right? No, what we have is gates men. And Musa is already there. Musa is already the gates with his children. Yeah. So you cannot start out of in the crowd. So that's part of the idea of the 300 missing pages, in the sense that put yourself in pages that you truly belong.
Right.
Right. So take whatever you read and adapt it to our local environment, and then learn from it, and you could truly gain capacity. What we tend to see, and why a lot of people don't invest, is that you have people who are more so mimicking. You're mimicking what you think it should be, as opposed to being what you should be. There's a difference, right? You ever see somebody dance as this, like kind of how they saw somebody dance on TV, as opposed to actually learning the steps? It's like a mimic. So you will find a lot of mimicking, and people don't really understand the true stories. Like, for instance, Mark Zuckerberg had a rich dad and he was in Harvard. The guy who did the other one, Amazon, he went to his parents and say, I want to do this idea. They said, no, stay in investment banking. No, I want to do this idea. And they gave him money.
Really? So people don't have that backstory.
Yeah. You don't have that background. If you don't have that background, you just think they kind of stepped into it.
Yeah.
You really should get the real story to help develop your path properly.
Fantastic. Andrew, do you have any views on that?
Well, I think, youth, the young entrepreneurs I meet who never maybe worked in formal settings, their energy level is fantastic. But one thing they don't really understand is the risk, and they don't understand.
Right.
And a lot of them that I deal with are in fintech space because that's my own big clients at PwC. They don't quite understand. You don't know what you don't know sitting outside the industry.
That's right.
So there's a kind of pattern, and what happens is, because there are support programs for young entrepreneurs, which I think are fantastic. So something like the Tony Alamella Foundation and others that are trying to help bridge an education gap.
Right.
They recognize people. So they get some support from that. People are encouraging them. But often, at the end of the day, most of these fail. Some will succeed,
yes.
but some fail. Is that a good or a bad thing? I'm not really sure. But I still think, going back to the point that Oswald made at the beginning, and we discussed this, we would be, if you think of actually stories like Bill Gates, stories like Mark Zuckerberg are so rare. That's why they are known globally, right? Let's call them most, let's say in US dollar terms, 8-digit companies. So someone that starts a company and eventually makes at least $10 million out of the company over 20 years, 15, 20 years. Because most of the companies are actually like that. They're not these 5-year wonders.
Yeah.
Most of the people that start that, if you look at the statistics, actually came from the industry. So they've been in the industry for a decade, 25 to 35. They see a need. When they go to build whatever product's going to serve that need or stitch together the new business concept, they have contacts in the industry. They know exactly what they're doing. So, but we, because of our unique environment, are kind of missing that segment. And again, the young people are kind of forced because of that. And the hype sometimes takes them in it. So we need to break a little bit that cycle. We need more formal employment. There's nothing wrong. I started my own career at McKinsey. The things I use today, I learned,
that's right.
First 2 or 3 years of my career at a very structured sort of environment on that. So we need to find that balance with the. On the other hand, I totally understand why Mr. Alamella would support the. Support entrepreneurs in that way, because there isn't a lot of other support mechanisms. There isn't a lot of formal employment. So in a way, he's filling a gap that we shouldn't be there.
Correct. And you're right, because, the question I was going to ask, and maybe we need more of the Tony Alumelus, because the reality is there is unemployment. People don't have jobs, so we don't have that opportunity. Yeah. And so we do need the interventions that would fill that gap. And so if we have more of because that's the reality we have, right? People just have to sort of get those skills. And then if we really want to enjoy the true benefits of the entrepreneurial landscape that we keep boasting of. Okay, Andrew, I've often heard you talk about this, I've heard you say this, that human welfare over GDP is what matters, and that linear economics works, but it's not sustainable. Can you just shed more light on this?
Well, I think we've kind of grown up in a world, just to use the developed or Western or whatever term people want to use here, world where we have a GDP lens, right? So we equate increased GDP to the country being better off. And it's understandable why we do that, because if we look historically at the 50s, 60s, 70s, and sort of maybe into the mid-80s, the relationship, say in the United States, between GDP and well-being was actually quite close.
Yeah.
So like why would you care about GDP? Because presumably if GDP is going up, people are better off.
Right.
That's because at the end of the day, we don't care about GDP, we care about people. So it was a good proxy. The problem is that the relationship after the mid-80s in many countries, Western countries, between GDP and welfare is broken down. And I can give you many examples.
Yeah.
A simple one. In Canada, we have quite a bit lower GDP than the United States, but we have a life expectancy of 82. In the United States, they have the higher GDP and they have a life expectancy of 78. Now, you would think that would be an urgent issue, but it was not mentioned. The fact that people die young in the United States is not mentioned on the campaign trail. But even within our context, there is a strong move. And of course, in Lagos, we have a fantastic leader of this, Shalape Hamid, who's the special advisor to His Excellency Governor Sanwo-Olu on SDGs. He's a brilliant young Nigerian who's really pushing this. We have the same issue here. So, for example, the GDP per capita in Lagos is about the same, or Nigeria as a whole is about the same as India, but the life expectancy in Lagos is 55 and the life expectancy in India is 69. So the ability to turn GDP into human welfare is vastly different. So we've been among the groups that have said, let's look at how well we're doing through an SDG lens. And Shalapa is doing an amazing job. We're going to hear more and more about this. And I can see 5 years from now we even stop measuring GDP.
Interesting. So the reason I ask about that is, so if we're looking at entrepreneurship and, what it contributes to GDP, so what does that mean for the role of entrepreneurship in, growing the economy versus, focusing on human welfare?
Well, sorry, I'll say one word and then let Oswald jump in. I get, most of the entrepreneurs, if not all, that I bump into in Nigeria are thinking already broadly. They want to do something that creates employment, reduces poverty, that helps the environment. That's already hardwired into the millennials. So, the millennials are going to push on and they're going to build a better society.
Oswald is laughing because I call myself a millennial. I am a millennial, and that's what we're doing. That's why there's social conscience with NASA. Okay. Oswald, did you have anything to contribute to what Andrew just said?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. So I'll just come to a question for you, Oswald. And so first of all, in the book, you talk about North Stars, building businesses that last. And for me, it's just about building businesses that last, and they select the right business structure for their businesses and choose board members and partners wisely. For me, very few businesses outlive their founders in Nigeria. So do you think we have enough North Stars, or are there North Stars in Nigeria?
Wow. I would say you have to pick your North Stars because everybody's unique, right? So you have to pick the people who help guide you to what you define as your success.
Okay.
Right? So it's really based on your definition. It's not something that I can sit and answer for the mass of Nigerians, right? So it's really based on what you believe is your idea of morals, your idea of success, how you see yourself being. Like I tell people all the time, my definition of success is wearing a pair of shorts on a Wednesday afternoon, walk right past Andrew's office and wave at him. That's my idea of success, right? It's Wednesday, it's 2 p.m. and I'm showing up for lunch with people and I have shorts and a pair of glasses on. So that may not be yours. You may want to be somewhere else. So North Star generally are people who you put in your constellation and you look up to. So if you picture, a baby in a crib and a baby mobile looking up and you see kind of the toys hanging down, you kind of, if you bought one as there's a piece hanging that you don't think you should have in front of your child, you're going to remove it and replace it with something else. It's the exact same thing with your constellation of North Stars. You put people there who you feel at this very given moment, help you chart a course to where you feel you want to be. And they can be replaced. It could be your parents, it could be a friend, it could be Andrew, it could be anybody who you feel, helps this constellation of this charting your path to where you want to be. So it could be anybody. It could be even somebody who we think is despicable, but there's something about them that you think you want to learn. So it's for you to determine.
Okay, so are your North Stars like mentors or just people who what's that role?
They could be mentor.
Right.
They could be mentors, but ultimately we don't want to. That mentor relationship tends to get bastardized a bit. The mentor relationship is a two-way street, right? So it's really a give and take. There's a relationship that's built before you can have a trusted mentor relationship, right? Right. So some of these people you put in your conversation don't really have to be your mentor. It could be people who you've read about and you keep reading about and you kind of follow their career and follow what they're doing from thousands of miles away, and you learn one particular thing on how they dealt in a particular transaction is interesting to you, and you put that as one of the things you want to replicate.
Fantastic. Okay, Andrew, I have a question for you, and it's a question that a friend of mine wanted me to ask you, and so she's asking, how can we get the government to support local content and manufacturing, especially in view of the launch of the AFCTA?
Well, I think that, everyone wants to do local manufacturing. It's not like the businesses want to import things. Importing is not simple, right? So if there was any choice, they're desperate. And I know the large companies that I'm familiar with, they're desperate to source as much locally, right? We've just made it difficult with all the things we know about in terms of infrastructure cost of energy, etc. So I mean, if we solve some of those issues, then we'll get more local content. Now, one thing though that I've sort of said, and actually I think is increasingly being recognized, is if we're honest with where the country is at, we take exports for a minute. It's easier to export non-physical goods. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about all the challenges of
that's true.
Trying to export manufactured goods. First, where would we export them? Europe is shrinking. Are we going to export to India? It's not easy. China, certainly not easy. So where do we export them? And the only place is ultimately Africa. But then, whereas if we export services, particularly like outsourced services, software, Andela, Google has a bigger thing, outsourced global, Hawson's company. So I think that the path that's going to happen for us is we're going to find, and we're not unique. So if you go back to India in the 90s, they had a lot of the same, they really started to boom, but what really led the boom was things that didn't have to be physically moved around.
That's right.
So they were culture, and of course cultural products we have, the Nollywood products and the music is among that. So they're going to lead, and I think increasingly people are going to recognize that. And of course, as we become more prosperous from that, the infrastructure will improve, and we'll all start manufacturing. So again, to use the India example, they did manufacture very little in the 1980s, and then they had the big outsourcing companies, the big software companies, and now they also do all sorts of manufacturing. But I think it's hard to lead with that content. But to the extent that we can get some power issues fixed in infrastructure, local manufacturers are desperate to be able to use local content.
Fantastic. Oswald?
Yeah, I think BPO is the way to go. I mean, definitely outsourcing. I mean, like we described it earlier, I mean, 200 million people, 60% is under 25, very intelligent, citizenry. I think in the right circumstances, we could definitely outsource all types of services, programming services, to the world. Yeah. I think that's definitely a good place to start.
Okay, Oswald, there's one question for you. We only have a few more minutes to go, so I'm just going to have one more question for each of you. Then I'll have you have your closing lines. So in the book, you talk about apprenticeship, and it was one of the oldest models for mentorship, which cuts across nations and cultures amongst the Jews and Lebanese. For me, I know the Jews and Lebanese have like huge business ventures and all of that. And in Nigeria, this is practiced among the Igbos. Like, Andrew, let me come to you quickly. So my last question to you, Andrew, is just to get your views on Nigeria's revenue sources and drivers of the economy, and what areas do you think that we should focus on to achieve better diversification? I think you actually talked about that. This is just a question that came in.
Yeah, no, so I think that certainly from the government perspective in terms of revenue, and also from driving employment and really making Nigeria better. We've always put the housing sector. The housing sector is number one, and governments need to get organized in terms of the land revenue that they receive and the fees they receive for building of houses on that. But beyond that, I think, as I said, every sector needs to be grown, and the government needs to think about how to attract people into the formal sector, because we still have 50% of the economy in the informal sector. And the problem with the informal sector is that it's better than nothing, but again, it's a second best, a bit of a plan B. And we want more businesses to be attracted into the formal sector. So both of those things, the land registry issue, the housing stock, the building of houses, really drives the economy, but also bringing more businesses who want to be in the formal sector. And the government really needs to think through how to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm not sure. I think we've lost Oswald and we're having some connectivity issues, but it's almost time to round up. And I would say I've had an extremely insightful conversation with you both. Time's gone so quickly because there's so many other questions that I'd love to ask, but I thank you for your time. And yes, are there any last few words you want to share with the audience before we close? Just 1 minute. Andrew?
Yeah, so I said before I was very optimistic, so let me repeat that. But also, I mean, I think it's a privilege for me to be part of it, and because if you think about some of the things that we think work well in other places and use as examples, these things took century or millennia to develop. I mean, the Western world I mean, from the fall of Rome to the end of the Second World War was whatever, 1600 years, right? So, and yet I'm witnessing just incredible changes in a decade. So I think in some ways, I mean, the country is phenomenal in that. And I don't think we should be constantly criticizing ourselves. We should be recognizing how rapidly things are changing for the better and how much potential there is to go forward. I mean, even having this conversation, the role of young people, the NSARs, political voice for young people, you look at how much that's moved in a year. So please, everyone, do your part to make the Nigeria we all know it can be, and be optimistic about it, and just get up every day and realize you're making a huge difference to what is going to be the second largest population country on the planet by the end of the century.
Fantastic. That's a very optimistic note to end. Thank you very much, Andrew. And to my listeners, for me, the closing remarks is entrepreneurship in Nigeria indeed seems to be the hope for the future, but it requires a concerted effort from all key actors to make the most of it, including yourself. We have come to the end of the discussions around entrepreneurship in Africa this month of November. I'm looking forward to another exciting theme for the month of December. Please tune in same time, same station next week to find out what we have coming up. I am yours conscientiously. Africa is rising, they say, but Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people? Through social change and development. Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1.
We are the wind in the sails of your business. We are your compass. Chart your course towards your targets. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.